Hello, welcome to episode 44 of To Be Honest. I'm Addison.
I'm Josh.
I'm Jackson. Thought you were going to introduce
And
us.
we watched Once Upon a Time in America.
No, we didn't.
We watched Once Upon a Time in Mexico.
No, we didn't.
We watched Once Upon a Time in Shanghai.
Oh.
Did we watch that one? No, we didn't.
We watched Once Upon a Time.
Oh boy.
We watched Once Upon a Time in America. We watched Once Upon a Time in Mexico.
No, we didn't.
We watched Once Upon a Time in Shanghai, Mexico. We watched Once Upon a Time in Mexico. We watched Once Upon a Time in America. We watched Once Upon a Time.
Brad Pitt was in Once Upon a Time in Mexico too, huh?
He
Wait.
no, he was in the Mexican.
Oh.
Once Upon a Time in Mexico is Antonio Banderas and
It's a Robert Rodriguez film with Johnny Depp and
Johnny Depp.
Antonio Banderas. It's a sequel to the Mariachi.
Why is it a movie called The Mexican and it's about a white dude?
I know. Talk about whitewashing. Hello, Hollywood. Fuck, that's it. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That's what we saw. That's what we saw.
Okay.
Buddy, order fried sauerkraut! Damn you Nazi bastards!
The new
I
film
remember.
by Quentin Tarantino.
Quentin Jerome Tarantino.
Tarantino, yes.
That's why I can say nigger.
Word.
I just got broadsided.
I mean, your word, but I meant more like in a, yeah, so we saw the new Tarantino film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, starring Brad Pitt and Leonardo DiCaprio.
Nice. Put some respect on his name.
Yeah. Also, there was Margot Robbie. There was Emile Hirsch. There was...
Oh, the Jerome. Wait. What
was his name? Steve McQueen guy?
Brett.
Wait. What? I don't remember.
Damian Lewis.
Damian Lewis.
Damian Lewis. Star-studded cast.
Al Pacino.
Al Pacino was in it as Schwartz.
Schwartz. Don't call me Schwartz.
Don't call me Schwartz.
Jewish.
Don't
joke.
call me Schwartz. It's Schwaz.
Schwartz. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mr. Schwartz. Yeah, it's the new Quentin Tarantino film. His first one since The Hateful Eight. Been a few years since.
It's been a while.
And
4 years.
it is a loose retelling of the Manson family murders, as well as a love letter to
based.
Hollywood.
Yeah.
loosely based.
I would like to introduce this movie. Quentin Tarantino said in an interview about this movie, Once Upon a Time in Shanghai, Hollywood, that it is like what's his face? Like Roma. This is his ode to Hollywood, ode to the time.
Roma wasn't an ode to
had
Hollywood. It was an ode to a different time.
Alfonso Cuarón had Roma in the 70s.
Time and place.
He had Mexico City, and then just like him, Quentin Tarantino has Los Angeles in 1969. That's what he said in an interview to the public.
So that is an actual comparison he made.
That is a literal comparison.
Interesting.
He said, "This is Roma for Hollywood." So that's just how I want to open up this discussion.
That works. That works for me.
We watched a Rick Dalton double feature. All the shooting. I love that stuff, with the killing.
A lot of killing.
Yeah, so I guess start with general impressions. What did you guys think of this movie?
It was long. Let's just say I was uncomfortable most of the movie, not because of the movie itself.
Yeah, you were like front row.
It's front row, baby. You gotta
Oh man,
you gotta
I
see up close.
refuse to watch a movie. Like,
I'll die. I'll do anything for this podcast. I'll die.
Remember when we watched Jurassic World and like the
thought about
fucking
that.
front row?
This is much better than Jurassic
Fallen
World.
Boner.
I forgot about
That's
that.
that's my initial reaction. This is much better than Jurassic World: Fallen Boner.
Okay, so we have better than Jurassic World. Jackson?
We're gonna start it pretty low and go from there. I liked it. I think that when I think about it, it's hard to pull out a plot, like a continuous story that I was like, I wasn't waiting for the next scene, like what's gonna happen to these characters. It was just kind of like you're along for the ride.
Saddle up and you just go on for a ride.
Yeah, there's some really satisfying scenes, but I think Tarantino does really well when he has, he doesn't base it off of like history per se, from in my preference for his movies. But what do you think about it?
Well, this is another one of his revisionist history movies, kind of like Django Unchained.
It was a lot like the Inglourious Basterds.
And Inglourious Bastards, like it's like a revenge against the villains, sort of, like in Inglourious Bastards, it was about how this Jewish troop went and killed a bunch of Nazis.
And they machine gun Hitler at the end.
Yes.
And kill, like,
the bad
Himmler
Jew.
and, like,
Yeah.
And end the war.
And then with Django, obviously, it's, against slave masters. Jamie Foxx, who plays the eponymous Django, goes on a bloody revenge-fueled
He's Unchained
trip with the wonderful Christoph Waltz.
I love that movie.
Christoph Waltz, man.
So my general impression of this movie, the more I think about it, the more I kind of love it. I have to say, so as far as Tarantino films are concerned, for me, my two favorites. I wanted to say my favorite. I love Jackie Brown.
Yeah,
Jackie Brown
Brown's
is
great.
a fucking fantastic movie. I think it's ignored a lot when they're talking about his filmography because it's not a typical Tarantino movie. So I got a lot of Jackie Brown vibes for this one because there were times where I had to remind myself I was watching a Tarantino movie because it doesn't have the same kind of outlandish dick swinging panache that, say, like Django had, right? Where it was very stylized. It had a pretty strong plot. This one just kind of like, it had interesting characters. It wanted us to get to know them. And it, more than anything, obviously, it was, as Josh kind of alluded to, a love letter to Hollywood.
Seems this world got you down. You're feeling bad vibrations.
Are you an actor?
No, I'm a stuntman.
Basically, if we want to put it in another term, post Hays Code Hollywood,
Like months after Hays Code,
where basically the old style of movie making, where you had true stars and all that was changing into this more edgy, violent, depraved, one might argue, cinema that has essentially paved the way for his career.
Yeah, Quentin Tarantino, I have my very strong opinions about him and his movies, but he knows his cinema.
He fucking knows his cinema.
He's quite. I was really waiting for him to be like, I wanted to see like some like ultra violent shot from a television show that was obviously filmed before '69, and be like, no, you wouldn't have seen that on the TVs. No, he was very consistent, and I felt the aesthetic and the fabric of 1969 Hollywood was very present, and it really, really kept me into it when I did not want to be into it.
It was there were so many, like the cinematography, which was done by Robert Richardson, who's been in Hollywood for like 40 or 50 years, was very old Hollywood. You had a lot of those like crane shots where the camera rises up, lots of dolly shots.
I like those shots. I miss those shots.
Yeah, it was great. And the last scene I'm thinking of specifically, where it starts in front of the house and then the crane goes around and blah blah blah. So there was a lot of artistry in this movie. I thought it was beautifully shot, really well acted. I do agree with Jackson that it's not exactly strong on plot, but that didn't bother me, at least after about the first 30 to 45 minutes. The scene where it started to click for me was when he was filming his part as what is the term that they use for the villain? The heavy. When he was shooting his scenes as the heavy on the set of the Western, that was when I was like, okay,
Things clicked into place for you then.
Yeah.
What clicked for you?
But what was? Yeah, I guess what was clicking?
Well, what clicked for me, I guess, is like what. First of all, it was the first point at which my interest was fully caught and I was invested in what was happening. But I started to understand what he was trying to do.
What he wanted to say for at least that character? Well,
just in general.
Just the tone?
Yeah, the tone. And also it just got interesting, like I said, I think at that point.
So I think that it started off pretty slow, which was maybe intentional, where they leave the set of like a movie or a show that he's doing, and then they drive to a bar, and he meets Al Pacino's character, and they kind of have a long, drawn-out conversation, which kind of sets up Leonardo DiCaprio's character, where he is a fading star, and he realizes that after this conversation with Al Pacino, who's trying to get him to go to Italy to do spaghetti westerns.
Yes.
Which is kind of like it's where, Western stars go to die, I guess.
Yes, but also, too, it's
69.
Like, who loves fucking spaghetti westerns more than Quentin Tarantino,
Yeah.
right? So that was definitely his first wink at us.
It's like, oh, they suck. And it's like, obviously they don't suck because it's a Quentin Tarantino movie.
Yeah.
And then it goes from there into something that Quentin Tarantino loves to do, which is a movie within a movie, where it cuts to Leonardo DiCaprio's his character's different movies that he's done, which I love the Nazi scene where he has a flamethrower and he torches just like a room full of Nazis.
Yeah, like Nazi generals. Anyone up for fried sauerkraut?
And then that goes on into where he's filming these movies, but you see it just from the perspective of the camera, like you're actually watching this movie that he's filming, which was interesting.
And they're all like ultra violent, right? I mean, westerns are also featured prominently in this, which is something that Quentin Tarantino loves, and I think is, if you examine that a little bit closer, I think he was saying something by featuring them so prominently.
I hired you to be an actor, Rick, not a TV cowboy. You're better than that. Line?
Anyways, man.
My cousin Peter told me that the way to blow smoke rings is to pretend like you're sucking on a nipple, but you can't use your tongue.
Mm-hmm. Or just sucking, like, out of an asshole.
Oh, God damn it.
I got the full cast.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, so the one thing that really stuck out to me about westerns and the themes of westerns when we studied them was the idea that westerns portray the idea of regeneration through violence. And I feel like that's a theme that Quentin Tarantino has done in almost every single movie that he's ever made. And this was no exception to that in terms of... No, go ahead.
Well, no, I guess explain.
Well, so this was no exception to it because the climax of the film is obviously incredibly violent, and I guess spoilers. I guess spoilers at this point.
Spoilers.
And it represents this kind of turning point for Leonardo DiCaprio's character, where he gets invited up to the Polanski mansion,
Right.
and there it's suggested essentially that he might be getting onto the second leg of his career then.
Yeah.
So it was regenerative for his career, and also for his friendship with Brad Pitt. Like there was a lot of that.
A lot of redemption.
Yeah.
Yeah, through the violence. I think that's fine. I think that's a fair analysis of it. Someone pitched this movie. Not pitch. I'm the fucking person that gets pitched to, but this movie was like called a western. Someone called it a western. Would you agree that this movie, in its essence, is a western?
I guess it depends on your parameters for defining a western.
Well, thematically, it has to be a western. It doesn't have to be set in, or thematically, it can be. If we talk about regeneration through violence, if we talk about, I guess like a post-war thing, like a post-Vietnam thing.
Well, Vietnam was ongoing when
69.
Yeah, when this was set. I do think that that's an accurate description, because westerns are the quintessential American film, right?
That's what we were watching in the 50s and 60s to kind of recapture our sense of like American identity and strengthen ourselves and like have some sort of sense of like what we are doing after like the casualties of dropping bombs on people. And
if I was gonna make that correlation, I'd say hippies are the Indians, and Brad Pitt is the hero.
He's John Wayne.
Yeah, he's John Wayne, and when the hippies invade at the end, he protects the homestead.
Yes.
and smashes their fucking face up against the
and there's also just the broken characters. Brad Pitt specifically is someone who's a veteran who has trauma, and like he is a broken man. I'm thinking of The Searchers right now. He's a murderer.
That's an interesting like little edge to his character that he like basically like harpooned his wife.
which
nagging wife.
I was actually very appreciative at the restraint that Quentin Tarantino showed there, where you didn't see him harpoon her, you just saw him like, kind of like playing with the trigger and drinking his beer.
For it.
Yeah.
Just to watch somebody take a harpoon to the chest.
Can't wait. I wish my wife take it.
She only had like 5 seconds of screen time, man. I thought she was nagging. I was ready to harpoon her. My wife.
Night and the leaves hanging down and the grass on the ground.
Here I am, flat on my ass. And who I got living next door to me?
I'm Sharon Tate. I'm in the movie.
You're in this?
That's me. I play Miss Carlson, the klutz.
Yeah, no, but
he's a character that is struggling in a world where he doesn't fit in anymore,
right?
Which is a very common thing for a Western.
And the same thing can be said of Leonardo DiCaprio's character.
They're foils of each other almost.
Yes,
basically in their essence, that they are literally replacing each other when certain things happen and they can't do certain things.
Yeah, like the homestead, right, of America, the idea of this like frontier that was so crucial in America's identity during the time of the frontier and the settling of the West and blah blah blah. And then in the 60s and 70s, you can say that the homestead or the frontier was Hollywood. It was the entertainment industry. That's what would go on to define the preceding decades after that. And the only time where I felt like he actually like paused what was happening in the film to make sure that we understood exactly what he was trying to get across here was that scene in the car towards the end when the chick is like, on one of our tripping sessions, I've been thinking, like, we all grew up watching TV, right? And they taught us to murder, and so we're going to murder the murderers, and so on and so forth.
Or we're going to murder those who taught us to kill, or something like that.
Taught us what killing is, and
yeah,
that was the only point of the movie where I felt like too on the nose for me, and where it was just like.
That was the main conceit behind the Manson family. That was kind of like one of the things that they had said.
They wanted to start a race war.
Yeah, well, and then there was the whole Beatles race war.
Which they left out of this movie.
I mean, Charlie Manson was on screen for
like 2 seconds.
2 seconds, maybe.
Barely. And I know that he was doing that shot where you just see like the silhouette of his head.
I did not like who they cast for that.
Before him.
He just had like some really prominent facial features.
There's another movie about the Manson family that came out, but it's about the women that came out a couple of months ago. There's no point in bringing it up. I don't remember the name. Here it is. But it also talks about kind of just revisiting the Manson thing. I don't know what it is with 2019, but we're doing it.
Well, I think maybe what Quentin Tarantino saw or sees is that the Manson family murders was some kind of crucial or pivotal point in Hollywood. Right. Like one could argue that perhaps that was a moment in which Hollywood lost its innocence.
Well, that was also the beginning of like televised crime, where people were like terrified in Hollywood because there was just like these murders happening around and they had no idea what was going on, so people were just like losing their minds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the blind panic caused by the mass media coverage of
the
blood and guts.
The Golden State Killer that rampaged like up and down California in the 70s. They recently caught.
They recently caught. And actually, there's a really, really good podcast by the LA Times called Man in the Window that's about the Golden State Killer. Recommend it to anyone if you're into that sort of thing.
The book's really good, too.
Book is really good, too. Michelle McNamara, Patton Oswalt's late wife. Anyways, we're getting off track here.
I want to talk about favorite parts and least favorite parts, if we have any.
I do. I wanted to throw one other idea past you because I think it's significant. If Brad Pitt is our John Wayne in this film, what is the significance of him dropping acid, which at that point was obviously like a cornerstone of the hippie movement? I have a theory, but it's kind of unformed at this point.
Well, lay it on us.
Well, so are you all familiar with George Hunter White? Have you ever heard that name before? other than the Twin Peaks song, George Hunter White?
Who was he?
So George Hunter White was like a CIA agent who was instrumental in the acid tests that the CIA conducted in the 50s and 60s. He would like host these massive social parties in New York, and he would dose people without them knowing, and then carefully record the results of what they were going through, because the CIA was interested in acid as a mind control device, MK Ultra. And so he kind of volunteered to be on the front lines. Evil fucking dude. There's one story where like some pregnant woman came to one of these parties for some reason, and he dosed her, and she went fucking nuts and lost her baby and ended up in an insane asylum for the rest of her life.
Jeez.
But then the interesting thing is that after his little escapades in New York, he moved out to San Francisco, and he started conducting volunteer acid tests at that point. And one of the first people to sign up for the acid tests was a Mr. Kenneth Kesey.
Oh, yeah.
So in effect,
Kenny Boy Kesey.
you can argue that the CIA was instrumental in creating the counterculture movement by conducting these acid tests.
So you're...
And so what I'm positing, I guess, is like, what about that marriage between this like typical manly man that Brad Pitt represents, this old school dude of which is, you know, kind of, if nothing else, like lost these days. Dude, this podcast is fucking, this one's cursed too.
No, just no one wants to talk about this movie.
But so I'm wondering like what he was, if he was alluding to something like that in terms of like who we were would never be the same again.
Okay. I like that idea, and I think there is some like, I don't know, maybe there is something to that. At the same time, based on crowd reaction, I feel like Quentin Tarantino is like thinking of this character that Brad Pitt's playing, which is like a very rigid man, just a fucking badass. Like he fucking beat Bruce Lee up. Like he is like the man. Look at those arms. Like, and like, wouldn't it be funny if he just did acid?
I think it did.
And the crowd loved
kind
it.
of like a comedic tone to that, like brutal fight scene at the end where he is having that conversation with Tex. And Tex is like saying what he said while he was doing the Manson murders, was just like, I'm the devil, I'm here to do the devil's business and stuff like that. And Brad Pitt just starts like laughing at him and imitating him.
And he does like the crazy eyes. Like,
yeah.
I do want to say real quick, Brad Pitt, fucking highlight of this movie.
He was really good.
Brad Pitt was incredible in this movie. I loved him. He was so fucking charismatic. I think you can't look past, I know your feelings about Leo, but I think you can't look past the fact that he, for his two leads, Quentin Tarantino, cast arguably two of the last true movie stars of our generation.
Hey, buddy. No, this is the third movie star of our generation.
He's never worked with Brad Pitt before, has he?
Yeah,
and
Inglourious
Inglourious
Basterds.
Basterds.
Yeah, and actually, too, you could argue that he was instrumental in Brad Pitt's rise because he wrote a film called True Romance. It was actually directed by Tony Scott, the late Tony Scott, Ridley Scott's brother, and Brad Pitt had one of his more famous roles as like the stoner in
really?
that movie. And there were actually some echoes during the acid scene of that character from True Romance with Brad Pitt's performance.
And so you guys liked Leo
Oh, no.
as like the lead?
I do not like Leo, and I will not like Leo.
Why don't you like Leo?
Well, he's a pretty bad actor to begin with. He's just pretty...
He's not a bad actor.
He's just pretty one note. He's just one note. Every time he wants to, like, belt some emotion out, he just starts screaming. I've said this before. His thing is screaming. And in this movie, he's playing a character who's, like, maybe at once a star, but we see through the cracks, and he's a pretty bad actor. It's just him being a bad actor. I've never seen anything that really made me feel, like, moved. And although there's a really nice touch when he was doing that scene, the scene you were talking about earlier, where he has like the girl, and she's, you know, being held hostage, and then they cut the scene because he gets the line perfect, and like as soon as it cuts, a little tear rolls down. Nice.
Well,
That's
she walks up to him and she says, "That was some of the best acting I've ever seen."
It's like practical effects, goodness, very good timing, not acting.
I'm Rick fucking Dalton.
Hey! You're Rick fucking Dalton. Don't you forget it.
So you had something you wanted to say?
I was just curious about what we thought. I mean, we've kind of like have talked about things we liked. It's, as Jackson said, not really a narrative-driven film. It's really just like scenes that we like.
Did you guys like the scene where they torch the hippie and smash the faces in of the other ones?
Yeah, I did not.
I kind of liked it. I mean, like it was ridiculous when Leonardo DiCaprio brought out the flamethrower.
I thought that was okay.
I thought it was amazing. I loved it. So here's what I thought was a particularly good example of excellent filmmaking. I don't know about you guys, but I could feel that there was like a tension in the air as they were kind of like walking up to the cul-de-sac where Sharon Tate and everyone was, and he was kind of misdirecting us by having that Kurt Russell monologue where there are timestamps and it's like at 10 so-and-so he laid down on the couch and smoked a joint, da-da-da. He was setting up our expectations to be like, oh shit, we're about to see some fucking nasty, horrific, violent, stabbed to death and people like writing shit in her blood. And then he started to punctuate it with a little bit of the humor, like with Leonardo DiCaprio making his margaritas and being like, it's fucking hippies, and going out and confronting them in their car. And
a lot of false starts for tension.
And then they're just like, he just completely diverts it without even giving you any indication. It's just, oh wait, now this is happening to our characters.
Well, what's genius too is that he has that bait and switch going to the last second until they break open the door, and it's Brad Pitt there instead of the Sharon Tate and her friends.
Yes.
So I thought that was cool.
Yeah. Yep. And Brad Pitt tripping his balls off,
just beating the ever living shit out of these hippies.
God,
I love the scene where they have the frame poster with the glass, and he just has the girl's hair or head in his hand. He's just smashing her head, and they're just moving across the poster, and you see like the blood spots.
Yes,
as he's smashing her head. That was brutal.
Yes,
and also the dog food can to the face that just smashes in her nose too.
God, it was disgusting. I mean, the violence was gross. Like it was over the top, gruesome, more graphic, I felt like, than he typically does.
It reminded me of Green Room type violence.
Yes, yeah. Where it was realistic in its portrayal of violence, whereas if you look at Django's just like fountains of blood coming out of people,
all over the place,
not necessarily graphic violence. So I think, again, I do think that was a deliberate choice on his part to have the violence be more graphic, because with the exception of that scene, there's only one other violent scene in the movie, which is when Brad Pitt goes to the ranch and he beats up that guy who stabbed his car.
That had some good effects on it too, where the guy gets lifted off the ground.
Yes,
when Brad Pitt just gives him a mean uppercut, and you just see his legs lift the ground.
Yes, well, and then what does he do? He picks him up by the hair, and right by the long hair, punches him. Yeah. Maybe Quentin Tarantino hates hippies. Maybe he thinks hippies are the death knell of America. Like trying to contrast Brad Pitt with these hippies. I don't know.
60s hippies were kind of obnoxious.
They were a little obnoxious. Yeah.
They did co-ops like black people. That's the thing.
So are you saying that black people co-opt and the hippies were like them in that respect?
They co-opted. They took the message of like Malcolm X and stuff, and they turned it into their own little thing, kind of like what people.
These were racist hippies too.
Yeah, the man's people were racist, but like just white people in general were like that were hippies. It's just like 2019, where white people just take what black people have been doing for decades and are like, oh yeah, we're all about that, and then just kind of fuck it up.
I know I've kind of been...
I don't know if I agree with Quentin Tarantino about hating hippies, but that's the one argument.
You don't have to agree with them. I've been kind of blathering because this movie has like suggested ideas to me, but I haven't been able to fully digest the movie because we just saw it like an hour ago.
And I think it would definitely... This is going to be one of those movies that I'm going to like a lot more the second time around, because
I agree.
At the beginning I'm not like hanging on every word being like, oh, this is super important stuff, because like, I don't know. It's when you understand where things are going, you can just like enjoy these scenes more and more.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot to enjoy in those scenes. Like every scene had a couple decent moments in them, at least, to where like at the beginning I was like, why is this in the movie? And then it was revealed to me why it was in there. I think this movie will reward repeat viewings.
This movie should be 2 hours and 40 minutes.
I don't know that it should be Endgame length, but then again, Endgame shouldn't be Endgame length.
I think we could do without Al Pacino and the Italian sequence.
And yeah, probably. Although I loved the fake posters. I loved the fake movie posters with Leo. Those were wonderful funny. Production design. I would say the scene with Bruce Dern probably could have been cut. Who's the old man? Who's George?
Well, that was
me.
probably longer than it needed to be.
It just didn't quite reveal itself to me, at least in terms of why this would be important to what we're watching.
Yeah, I was just trying to like build suspense where you think that he's gonna walk into the room and it's just gonna be like a decomposing old man,
right?
But he's just like, get the fuck out. Like,
yeah,
that's I love Squeaky.
I'm fucking blind. How do I know what color her hair is? This movie was less funny than I thought it would be, because typically Tarantino kind of elicited some laughs out of me, if for no other reason than he can just be so fucking audacious in what he's willing to say and what he's willing to show.
You like when man grab woman and hit.
All right,
that makes you laugh.
It made me laugh the way you described it.
No,
I think the funniest touch in this movie is Leonardo running his lines against the tape recorder.
Oh yeah.
Si, senor. As he's like,
the second time around too, when he's in the trailer and you like hear like, come on in, like he's doing like a woman or something.
Yeah, and he's doing like a British voice too. I thought that was great, and I wanted Leonardo's life so badly in that moment where he has like the beer stein full of whatever weird cocktail he was making.
Yeah, putting raw egg in it.
Yeah, and he just gets onto his little pool chair and floats around, and he's just running his lines. And I love too how hungover he obviously was the following day. His eyes are like bloodshot. He's putting his face in the ice water.
I felt that too much.
God, I've been there. I've been there, man.
That was his best acting.
Embarrass yourself like that in front of all those goddamn people.
Where do you guys think that this ranks in Quentin Tarantino's filmography?
It's probably next to Inglourious Basterds, around the middle somewhere.
What's your like top three?
Inglourious Basterds in the middle.
Yeah, top three for me: Pulp Fiction, Django Unchained, Jackie Brown.
Just Jackie Brown and Inglourious Basterds.
Really?
Yeah, everything else I've just maybe Reservoir Dogs.
Reservoir Dogs is boring.
Yeah,
Jackson objects to Joshua objects to the Quentin Tarantino cameo in Pulp Fiction, I think.
I don't stand a Quentin Tarantino.
Do you see a sign over my garage that says...
Yeah. No, I understand.
Yeah.
You don't. Everyone else understands.
Do you think so?
That says Dead Hippie Storage.
Where it says
Dead Hippie Storage, yes, exactly right.
Dead niggers.
No N-words in this movie.
I apologize to Josh actually upon leaving the theater.
Yeah, I can't hate this movie.
No N-words.
Yeah.
I can't hate this movie.
What's your top three?
There's literally not a single racial slur in the entire thing. The only thing that even
Mexicans
bordered on racism was when he was like, "Come on, man, you don't want to be crying in front of the Mexicans." Brad Pitt says that to Leo in the parking lot. I would say Jackie Brown is probably my favorite. Pulp Fiction's a great movie. I mean, objectively, like, it's a really interesting movie. It was groundbreaking for its time in the way that it told the story. But I would say that this is definitely in my top three.
Not a Kill Bill man, huh?
Kill Bill... I just don't necessarily love
Lady Snowblood ripoff. It's a ripoff.
Well, I mean, it's like he has all those influences of like the Japanese influences, martial art influences there, and I understand it was a love letter to those things, and it has its interesting moments, but ultimately, no, I don't love it. I I think that this is a good example of him restraining a lot of his instincts, which is typically towards excess. And this was, like Jackie Brown, a more subtle, character-driven movie that wasn't heavy on plot, that also wasn't heavy on extreme violence or any of the other things that he has a tendency to do. And it was just like...
There's a lot of excess.
It was just a good old-fashioned fucking movie. What do you mean?
It's just so long, and I felt like I don't know the point.
It was self-indulgent. It was a little self-indulgent in its length.
That's the
yes.
Well, also just I felt like I'm being talked to by Quentin Tarantino, and that's a lot of times like that's where I want to back off from his movies. But this movie felt just very much, and I mean informed by like him talking about the movie, having read some stuff about it before. I just felt. I don't know, I just didn't feel very, I felt a little icky just thinking about how he wants us to perceive Hollywood, if this is truly how he perceived it, or perceives it currently.
See, I disagree with that. I don't think this is so much his perception of Hollywood. He loves movies. That much is evident. He's been talking about that from the beginning of his career. I think he's examining what he perceives to be the huge impact that Hollywood, the TV and the film sections of Hollywood have had on our culture at large. No, the way that has shaped our culture.
I think that's too much. You're projecting too much. I think he wanted to recreate something and have cool characters do things that maybe hint at that, but I don't think that's the overall message. I think he wanted to create a time and really get you invested in it and feel as if you're with these characters in 1969.
And he was extraordinarily successful in that endeavor, in my opinion, then. I thought it was great. One thing that really stuck out to me, it sounded like you had something to say. I loved the scene where the sun goes down in L.A. after we have that really that long... There were actually many great scenes. That probably the middle chunk of the movie, hour and a half, was like that one day, right? Where Leo's filming his scenes as the heavy Margot Robbie as Sharon Tate goes to the movie theater to watch her own movie and like enjoy the audience reaction. I fucking loved those moments. I thought those were great. The way she was just like sitting there enjoying everyone enjoying her movie.
It was a nice moment. I liked it, except for the feet. I mean, I guess
there were some nasty fucking feet in this movie. Like when the hippie puts her feet up on the glass when Brad Pitt picks her up. Oh, they're like yellowed and dirty. But I loved when the sun goes down and it's that montage of all the neon lights coming on.
There's that crane shot too.
Yes, the old school Taco Bell, and I thought it was.
It's a bit of a nostalgia trip. It's a bit of a like. It relies a little bit on that. I mean, not as much as I was expecting. It had some restraint, like you said, but there was some moments where I'm like. But again, that's just building the scene and building the setting.
Well, here's something that I keep cutting you off right as you're like, go for it. Nostalgia is a currency in our culture. Nostalgia maybe more than ever, is like the means by which many of us interact with the world and interact with each other. How else can you explain like Star Wars, right? The fact that Star Wars came back. I mean, aside from the fact that it's a cash juggernaut, what it does is it plays on so many people's nostalgias for their childhoods. And it's a diversionary interest or endeavor.
Well, it's easy too because it existed. We don't have to do much in terms of like recreating something that already existed. We can pull from that. Quentin Tarantino does a really nice job of incorporating his own flair, like having the Leonardo DiCaprio stuff where he's doing his own films or his own like TV spots or whatever. But nostalgia is just like the easiest thing to inject into an audience where they can be like, oh, I remember that. Oh, I really feel like I'm there.
So you still with Rick, huh? Still here.
You can do anything you want to him.
Look, like I was pointing out a little bit, there's little things you can pick up on, like when he punches the hippie and picks the hippie up by the hair, right? He's got this fistful of fucking hair. He wouldn't be able to do that if it wasn't a hippie who had long hair. So perhaps that's a commentary on the feminization of man that began in da-da-da-da-da. I'm not saying that that's what he was doing or that it's correct, but I'm saying that there's way more opportunity to read a little bit deeper into the text.
Okay, I agree.
Now, after 25 minutes...
No. Jackson, do you like this movie? Would you recommend it?
I like it. I want to watch it again. If you are interested in a Quentin Tarantino movie, I would recommend it, but I think it's going to take a particular person to enjoy this movie.
Well, I like it. I think it's good. I have lots of problems with it, but that's Quentin Tarantino for you. And I recommend it.
It's no secret at this point that I like this movie, and I would recommend it. Really, really did like it. It was entertaining and it was enjoyable, and I felt like just with all the movies that we've seen recently, between fucking like Endgame and all that shit that is absolutely a jerk off, I felt like this movie respected me as an audience member more than a lot of movies that we've talked about recently.
That's a really unfortunate and good point, that like comparing it to the other movies we've seen, like the audience really wasn't like guffawing too much at like just like any cheap trick. There was moments where it was funny, or like, you know, you expected the audience to laugh. They deserved to laugh. They earned it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the audience. That's a good point. We felt respected. Like, we knew things because of Hollywood. We understand movies. We watch them a lot. We're buffs, and we weren't really cheapened on that front.
No, I felt like the more you knew about Hollywood and the more you knew about film, the more this movie in particular rewarded you.
Yeah.
I was just laughing at the scene of Leonardo DiCaprio with his flamethrower, just like torching her in the pool. That was so ridiculous.
That was a really nice touch.
I fucking thought it was brilliant. Like, it was such a great callback where he sets it up,
screaming for like
flailing, shooting her gun up in the air because her face has been crushed by a fucking can of dog food
and a dog.
A pit bull just got mauled her.
He goes into the like bath or the pool house and like within seconds has it like strapped up and ready to go. It was like he's just had it ready there, like with a sign above it said 4 hippies only.
Oh, you know what I was thinking? I wonder if Roman Polanski's gonna watch this.
I don't know, man.
Probably not.
Wait.
He is a fucking pedophile, right? Which he's
So I've heard like kind of mixed things about that. I've heard that's kind of been overblown.
All I know is that he had sex with a 15-year-old girl. That's the story.
Yeah.
He did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, he had sex with a 15-year-old girl.
Multiple times.
And then he has, essentially evaded any kind of punishment for that. He's not being extradited by...
Where's he at in Europe?
Poland, I think. Isn't he back in Poland?
I don't know where he's at.
I think he's back in Poland, but... yes, problematic as those things are, about Roman Polanski's personality.
What does it say about Leo wanting to get into his favor? Like, I don't know.
There's another idea.
The problems of Hollywood when we find out that Brad Pitt's character Cliff's wife was murdered. Kurt Russell is like, okay, my wife said he's not going to go on, and then Leo's like, he's going to go on. Come on. He's like, okay, he's going to go on.
Well, and then you talk
There's
about
just like the problems there, and
when his wife confronted Brad Pitt in that scene, and she was like, "Get the fuck out of here!" Da 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 da. And he was like, "I'll handle this." And then he says exactly the same thing as her. So a patriarchy of Hollywood.
And it works.
Commentary on that. And I actually didn't even think about it, but I think that's an interesting point. He was trying to curry Roman Polanski's favor. Us as the audience knows that dude is a fucking weirdo pedophile. And who runs Hollywood but weirdo pedophiles?
As we've talked about.
Polanski wasn't that way at that point. It was after his pregnant wife got murdered that he just turned.
Perhaps. I mean, you can't.
Well,
at least
what people know about, anyways.
Yeah, you can't underestimate the effect that had to have had on him as a man to have his pregnant wife murdered in one of the most famous brutal murders of all time.
Yeah,
there's not a person alive in America under the age of, or over the age of like 15 probably, that doesn't know about Charlie Manson and the Manson murders. So he was playing on that. He was playing on our playing on our knowledge of the world and etc. No, I think this movie's great. I love it.
I'm probably gonna cut all that out.
Okay.
But yeah.
All right.
I don't know. He's broken. Do your thing.
Si, senor.